Walk it off. Stop being a baby, my wife yelled as I lay motionless on the ground. My wife's brother stood smirking while her sister accused me of ruining her birthday. But when the paramedic saw I couldn't move my legs, she immediately called for police backup. The MRI would reveal. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and immediately know you don't belong? That's exactly how I felt standing on Marissa's pool deck, watching the rain droplets still clinging to the fancy outdoor furniture like they were scared to let go. Hell, I didn't blame them. I was scared to let go too, but not of some overpriced patio chair. I was scared of what this whole damn party represented. The concrete under my work boots was slick, and I kept shuffling toward the edge of the pool area, trying to blend into the background like I always did at these family gatherings. My steel-toed boots felt completely out of place against all the designer sandals and boat shoes scattered around the deck. Everyone else looked like they'd stepped out of some country club catalog, and here I was in my wrinkled khakis and company polo, still smelling like the warehouse from my double shift that morning. Tracy was across the yard, and damn if she didn't look right at home with her people. She had that laugh going. You know the one, where she throws her head back and shows off those perfect white teeth her daddy paid for. She was clutching some fancy cocktail that probably cost more than I made in a day, standing next to her brother Brent and sister Marissa like they were posing for a magazine spread. The golden children, all three of them, with their perfect lives and perfect problems. I should have stayed home. Should have told Tracy I was too tired, too busy, too whatever. But you don't say no to the Hendersons when they're throwing a party. Not if you're married to one of them, anyway. Not if you want to keep the peace in your own house. The party was in full swing around me. Kids splashing in the pool, adults networking over wine and cheese that had names I couldn't pronounce. I recognized most of the faces from previous family gatherings, but recognition doesn't equal belonging. These people knew exactly what I was. Tracy's blue-collar husband who didn't quite fit their mold. The guy who fixed things and moved boxes while they moved money and made deals. I was minding my own business, really I was. Just standing there watching the water ripple in the pool, thinking about how much overtime I'd need to pull to afford the electric bill this month, when I saw him coming. Brent, that swagger of his that screamed privilege and entitlement from 50 yards away. He had that look in his eyes, the same one he'd had since the day I married his sister. That look that said he was about to have some fun, and I was going to be the entertainment. Everett, his voice cut through the party chatter like a knife through butter. There's my favorite brother-in-law. Favorite and only, but who's counting? I forced a smile and gave him a nod. Hey, Brent. Hell of a party. You know what this party needs. He was grinning now, that shark-like smile that made my stomach twist. Some excitement. Some real fun. I could feel the eyes on us already. The other guests sensing something was about to happen, turning to watch like we were the main event. This was how it always went with Brent. He needed an audience for his games, needed witnesses to his dominance. And I was always his favorite target. Come on, Everett, he called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. Let's show these people some real fun. I took a step back, my boots scraping against the wet concrete. I'm good, man. Really, just enjoying the party. But Brent wasn't taking no for an answer. He never did. That's when I felt his hand clamp down on my arm. Not friendly, not playful, but possessive, like I was his property to do with as he pleased. No, 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 I said, trying to keep my voice calm, trying not to make a scene. Brent, I'm in my work clothes, man. I don't want to. Don't be such a buzzkill. Tracy's voice cut through my protests like she was scolding a child. She didn't even look up from her conversation, just waved her hand dismissively in my direction. It's Marissa's day, Everett. Stop being so damn dramatic. Dramatic. That was always her word for me when I tried to set boundaries. When I tried to say no to her family's idea of fun, when I didn't want to be the butt of their jokes or the target of their games. Dramatic. Marissa chimed in from across the deck, her voice sharp with irritation. Seriously, Everett, can you just go along with something for once? This is supposed to be my special day. The crowd was watching now, all of them, waiting to see what would happen next, waiting to see if I'd be a good sport or if I'd ruin the party with my drama. The pressure was suffocating, but it was familiar too. This was how it always went in Tracy's family. You played along with their games, or you were the problem. Brent's grip tightened on my arm. See, even the birthday girl wants you to have some fun. Come on, little brother. Little brother. I was 34 years old, but to Brent, I'd always be the little brother who needed to be put in his place. The outsider who needed reminding of where he stood in the family hierarchy. Brent, please. I tried one more time, but my voice was drowned out by his laughter and the encouraging calls from the crowd. Someone shouted, "Do it." Someone else was already pulling out their phone to record whatever was about to happen. That's when Brent spun me. Hard. Like I was a toy, like I weighed nothing at all. The world tilted sideways, and I felt my feet leave the ground. For a split second, I was airborne, completely at the mercy of momentum and gravity and Brent's idea of entertainment. I wasn't a child. I was a grown man with responsibilities and bills and a bad back from years of warehouse work. But in that moment, spinning through the air with the sound of laughter filling my ears, I felt as helpless as a kid being bullied on a playground. The edge of the pool was right behind me. I could see it rushing toward me as I spun, could see the concrete steps that led down into the water. Hard, unforgiving concrete that didn't care about birthday parties or family dynamics or keeping the peace. This was supposed to be just a joke, right? Just Brent being Brent. Just family fun that I'd laugh about later. That's what Tracy would say afterward. What they'd all say. Just harmless fun that went a little too far. But as I felt Brent's hands release me, as I felt myself falling backward toward those concrete steps, I knew this wasn't going to be funny at all. You ever have one of those moments where everything slows down like you're watching it happen to someone else? That's exactly what it felt like when Brent let go of me. 1 second I was spinning through the air like some kind of twisted carnival ride, and the next I was watching myself fall backward in what felt like slow motion. My arms were flailing, trying to grab onto something, anything, but there was nothing but empty air and the sound of people laughing. The laughter was the worst part, not the falling, not even the fear of what was coming, but hearing all these people finding my terror hilarious. Like my panic was the punchline to some joke I wasn't in on. I could see Tracy from the corner of my eye as I spun, still holding that damn cocktail, still wearing that expression like I was embarrassing her just by existing. Her lips were moving, probably complaining to whoever would listen about how I always had to make everything about me. Classic Tracy. Even when I was literally falling through the air, she made it about how it affected her. Time stretched like taffy as I stumbled mid-spin, my work boots trying to find purchase on the wet concrete, but finding nothing but slick surface and gravity pulling me down. My body was completely off balance, arms windmilling uselessly as I realized with crystal clarity exactly where I was headed. The concrete steps. Jesus Christ, the concrete steps. I'd noticed them earlier when I was trying to stay out of everyone's way. 3 sharp-edged steps leading down into the shallow end of the pool. Expensive-looking stone, probably some fancy Italian marble that cost more than my truck. Beautiful to look at, but hard as hell and completely unforgiving. My back hit those steps with a sound I'll never forget. Not a thud, not a splash, but a crack. A sharp, definitive crack that seemed to echo across the entire yard like a gunshot. The kind of sound that makes everyone stop talking, even if just for a second. But they didn't stop talking. They didn't even stop laughing. The pain was immediate and absolute. Not like when you bang your shin on a coffee table or stub your toe. This was different. This was my entire world suddenly narrowing down to one single point of agony that radiated out from my lower back like lightning. I tried to suck in air, but my lungs felt like they'd forgotten how to work. I was lying there on those damn steps, half in the pool, half out, my work shirt soaked through and clinging to my skin. The water was warm against my back, but I couldn't feel anything below my waist. Nothing. Like someone had just erased the bottom half of my body. Walk it off, Everett. Tracy's voice cut through the haze of pain and shock. She was actually shouting at me, her voice sharp with irritation and embarrassment. You're embarrassing us. Don't be such a baby. A baby. I couldn't feel my legs, couldn't breathe properly, and she was calling me a baby in front of all her friends and family. I tried to turn my head to look at her, try to make her understand that something was seriously wrong, but she wasn't even looking at me. She was looking at her guests, probably trying to gauge how much damage control she'd need to do. Marissa's voice joined in from somewhere near the patio. Of course, she said, her tone dripping with frustration. Of course he pulls this drama on my birthday. My one special day, and he has to make it all about him. My one special day? Like I'd planned this. Like I'd asked Brent to grab me and throw me into her fancy pool steps just to steal her thunder. The absurdity of it would have been funny if I could feel anything below my waist. I tried to speak, tried to tell them that something was really wrong, but my voice came out as barely a whisper. I can't move my legs. The words hung in the air for a moment, but nobody seemed to hear them over the sound of their own complaints and excuses. Brent was somewhere behind me, probably trying to figure out how to spin this into another joke. The other guests were starting to drift back to their conversations, the entertainment apparently over. But then everything changed. Samantha, one of Marissa's friends who I'd barely noticed before, suddenly appeared beside me. While everyone else was bitching and moaning about their ruined party, she was actually looking at me. Really looking, with the kind of focused attention that made me realize she wasn't just another country club princess. "Hey," she said, her voice calm but urgent as she knelt down next to me. "Hey, can you hear me?" I nodded, or tried to. Everything felt disconnected, like my head was floating separately from the rest of me. "I need you to try something for me, okay?" Her hands were moving over my legs, checking for something I couldn't understand. "Can you feel this?" She pressed down on my shin, then my thigh, then my ankle. "Nothing. Absolutely nothing." "Can you wiggle your toes for me?" I tried. God, I tried so hard. I stared down at my feet, willing them to move, concentrating every ounce of energy I had left on just making my toes twitch. But it was like sending signals to a phone that had been disconnected. The message wasn't getting through. Samantha's face went white. Not pale, not concerned white. The color drained out of her cheeks so fast, it was like watching someone pull the plug on a bathtub. "Nobody touch him," she said, her voice suddenly carrying the kind of authority that made everyone stop what they were doing. "Nobody move him at all." The laughter died. Finally, blessedly, the laughter died. "What's wrong with him?" Tracy's voice had changed now, less irritated and more worried. Like maybe she was starting to realize this wasn't just me being dramatic. "This could be spinal," Samantha said, already pulling out her phone. "This could be really, really bad." Spinal. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. I knew what that meant, even through the shock and pain. I'd seen enough movies, heard enough stories. Spinal meant wheelchairs. Spinal meant never walking again. The concrete steps were still digging into my back, but I couldn't feel them anymore. Couldn't feel the warm pool water lapping at my sides. Couldn't feel my legs at all. Just dead weight. Just nothing. The shift in the air was instant. One moment, everyone was treating this like some slapstick comedy routine, and the next, Samantha's voice cut through the party chatter like a scalpel through skin. "Everyone back up. Now." She wasn't asking. She was commanding, and something in her tone made even Brent shut his mouth for once. "I mean it. Get away from him. Nobody touches him. Nobody moves him. Nobody does anything." I was still lying there on those concrete steps, feeling like I was watching this whole scene unfold from somewhere outside my own body. The pool water was getting warmer around me, or maybe I was just getting colder. Hard to tell when half your body has basically gone offline. Samantha was crouched next to me, her hands hovering over me, but not quite touching, like I was some kind of bomb that might go off if she made the wrong move. Her face was dead serious now, none of that polite party smile she'd been wearing earlier. "What's your name?" she asked me, her voice steady and professional. "Everett," I managed to croak out. My voice sounded weird, like it was coming from someone else's throat. "Okay, Everett. I'm Samantha. I'm a paramedic, and I need you to listen to me very carefully. You're going to be okay, but I need you to stay very, very still. Can you do that for me?" A paramedic. Thank God. Finally, someone who knew what the hell they were doing instead of just standing around making jokes about my pain. "Can you feel this?" She touched my leg again, pressing firmly against my calf. I stared down at her hand, willing myself to feel something, anything. But it was like watching someone touch a mannequin. I could see it happening, but there was no sensation, no connection between what my eyes were seeing and what my body should have been feeling. "No," I whispered. "Nothing." She nodded grimly and pulled out her phone, but before she could dial, Brent decided to open his big mouth again. "Come on, Sam," he said with that forced laugh that meant he was starting to get nervous. It was just horseplay. Guys probably just winded, you know? Maybe pulled a muscle or something. Horseplay. Jesus Christ, he was still calling it horseplay. Samantha didn't even look at him. "Brent, I need you to shut up and step back. Right now." "Hey, there's no need to be. There's every need." Her voice was ice cold. You just threw a grown man backward into concrete steps. He can't feel his legs. This is not horseplay. This is a medical emergency. And if you don't get out of my way so I can help him, I'm going to have you arrested for interfering with medical care. That shut him up real quick. Brent's face went from cocky to pale in about 2 seconds flat. Good. Maybe now he was starting to understand that this wasn't just another one of his stupid pranks. Tracy, on the other hand, was still in full denial mode. She came stumbling over, that cocktail still clutched in her perfectly manicured hand like it was some kind of security blanket. Samantha, don't you think you're being a little dramatic? She was using that voice, the one she used when she was trying to manage a situation without actually dealing with it. Everett's always been prone to, making things seem worse than they are. He's probably just tired from work. Tired from work. Like exhaustion was what made your legs stop working. Ma'am, Samantha said without looking away from me. Your husband has suffered what appears to be significant spinal trauma. He has no sensation or movement in his lower extremities. This is not fatigue. This is not dramatics. This is a potential life-altering injury that requires immediate medical intervention. Life-altering injury. The words hit me like another punch to the gut. I knew it was bad, but hearing it spelled out like that by someone who actually knew what they were talking about made it real in a way it hadn't been before. Samantha was already dialing 911, holding the phone to her ear with one hand while keeping the other positioned near me, ready to stop anyone who might try to move me. This is Samantha Rodriguez, off-duty paramedic, she said into the phone, her voice crisp and professional. I need an ambulance at 1247 Oakwood Drive. Adult male, approximately 34 years old, possible spinal cord injury following blunt force trauma to the lumbar region. Patient is conscious and alert, but reports complete loss of sensation and motor function in both lower extremities. The way she talked, so calm, so precise, it was both reassuring and terrifying at the same time. Reassuring because finally someone was taking this seriously, terrifying because the clinical language made it sound even worse than I'd thought. No, do not attempt to move the patient, she continued into the phone. Mechanism of injury was a backward fall onto concrete steps following forceful spinning motion. Yes, I'll stay on the line. Tracy was starting to pace now, her heels clicking against the wet concrete like a metronome counting down to disaster. This is ridiculous, she muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. He's going to be fine. He's always fine. This is just Everett being Everett. But even as she said it, I could hear the doubt creeping into her voice. Maybe she was finally starting to realize that her husband lying motionless in a pool wasn't normal, even for me. Marissa was standing off to the side, arms crossed, looking like someone had just canceled Christmas. I can't believe this is happening at my party, she said to no one in particular. This was supposed to be perfect. Perfect. Right. Because my potential paralysis was really just an inconvenience to her birthday celebration. The other guests were starting to cluster together in small groups, whispering among themselves and shooting glances in my direction. Some looked concerned, others just looked uncomfortable, like they weren't sure whether they should leave or stick around for the drama. How long for the ambulance? I asked Samantha, surprised by how weak my voice sounded. 5 minutes, maybe less, she said, covering the phone's mouthpiece. They're sending a full crew with spinal immobilization equipment. You're going to be okay, Everett. We're going to take good care of you. 5 minutes. In 5 minutes, this would all become real in a way that couldn't be denied or explained away. In 5 minutes, the ambulance would show up and everyone would have to admit that this wasn't just me being dramatic or attention-seeking or whatever the hell they'd convinced themselves it was. I could already hear the sirens in the distance, getting louder by the second. The sound of my life changing forever, one wail at a time. The sirens got louder until they were right on top of us, then suddenly cut out, leaving this weird silence that felt heavier than all the noise that had come before. I could hear car doors slamming, radio chatter, the sound of equipment being moved around. Professional voices cutting through the suburban quiet like they owned the place. First through the gate was Officer Riley. I could see his name tag when he knelt down next to Samantha. Big guy, probably in his 40s, with the kind of calm demeanor that comes from seeing too much shit to get rattled by anything. His uniform was crisp, his badge polished, and he had that cop look in his eyes, the the one that misses nothing and judges everything. What do we have here? He asked Samantha, but his eyes were already scanning the scene, taking in the wet concrete, the pool, the crowd of overdressed people standing around looking uncomfortable. Adult male, spinal trauma from a fall, Samantha said, still in full professional mode. Witnessed event. No sensation or movement below the waist. Riley nodded and pulled out a small notebook. And you are? Samantha Rodriguez, paramedic with Metro West. I'm off duty, but I was here when it happened. The ambulance crew came through the gate next. 2 women in matching Navy uniforms, moving with that practiced efficiency that emergency responders get after years of dealing with other people's worst days. The older one, a black woman with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes, knelt down beside me while her partner started unpacking equipment from a bright yellow bag. "Hi there, I'm Cassidy," she said, her voice warm but professional. "I'm going to be taking care of you today. What's your name, sir?" "Everett," I managed. My mouth felt dry as sand, and my voice sounded like it was coming from the bottom of a well. "Okay, Everett, can you tell me what happened here?" This was it, the moment of truth. I could feel everyone's eyes on me. Tracy, Brent, Marissa, all the party guests who'd been laughing just minutes ago. They were all waiting to see what story I'd tell, probably hoping I'd downplay it, make it sound like an accident, keep the peace like I always did. But lying there on those concrete steps, unable to feel half my body, something had shifted inside me. Maybe it was the pain, maybe it was the fear, or maybe it was just finally having someone, several someones, who were actually listening to me instead of telling me to walk it off. Brent picked me up and threw me. I said, the words coming out clearer and stronger than I'd expected. I told him no. I told him I didn't want to do it. He grabbed me anyway, spun me around, and threw me backward into these steps. I can't move my legs. The silence that followed was deafening. I could practically hear Tracy's jaw drop, could feel Brent's panic radiating across the deck like heat from a fire. This wasn't the story they wanted me to tell. This wasn't me being a good sport about their family fun. Cassidy nodded calmly and looked over at Officer Riley. "You getting this?" "Every word," he said, scribbling in his notebook. Then he looked up at the crowd. "I'm going to need to speak with everyone who witnessed what happened. Nobody leaves until I've gotten statements from all of you." That's when Tracy decided to make her move. She came clicking over in those ridiculous heels, still holding that damn cocktail like it was some kind of prop. "Officer, I think there's been a misunderstanding," she said in that voice she used when she was trying to charm her way out of trouble. "My husband is he's been working a lot of double shifts lately. He's exhausted. Sometimes when he's tired, he gets a little confused, you know?" Confused. She was actually trying to tell a cop that I was confused about what had just happened to my own body. Cassidy didn't even look at Tracy. She was busy checking my pupils with a small flashlight, testing my reflexes, doing all those medical things that were way over my head. "Can you wiggle your toes for me, Everett?" I tried. Jesus, I tried so hard. I stared down at my feet, willing them to move, concentrating every ounce of energy I had left. But it was like trying to operate a remote control with dead batteries. The signal just wasn't getting through. "No," I said, and the word came out smaller than I'd intended. "I can't feel them at all." Cassidy exchanged a look with her partner, one of those professional glances that said more than words ever could. Then she looked over at Officer Riley. "We need to treat this as a potential assault with serious bodily injury," she said quietly, but not so quietly that I couldn't hear her. "This is an accidental trauma. Based on the patient's account and the mechanism of injury, this appears to be intentional. Assault." The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. Suddenly, this wasn't just a family incident or a party gone wrong. This was a crime scene. Brent must have heard it too, because he started backing away from the group. "Now wait just a damn minute," he said, his voice getting higher and more defensive. It was just fooling around. Guys being guys. He's being dramatic like he always is. "Sir, I'm going to need you to stay right where you are," Officer Riley said without looking up from his notebook. His voice was calm, but there was steel underneath it. "And I'm going to need you to stop talking until I'm ready to take your statement." "This is bullshit," Brent muttered, but he stopped moving. Cassidy was attaching some kind of monitoring equipment to my chest while her partner prepared what looked like a long yellow board. "Everett, we're going to get you immobilized and transported to the hospital. I'm not going to lie to you. This is serious." But you're in good hands now, okay? She was radioing in to dispatch, her voice professional and urgent. Unit 47 requesting police backup at current location. Suspected assault with bodily injury. Patient is a 34-year-old male with apparent spinal cord trauma following alleged physical assault. Everything stopped. The party guests, Tracy's complaining, even Marissa's birthday drama. It all just froze. Because those words made it official. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't horseplay. This wasn't me being dramatic. This was assault. And everyone at this fancy pool party was about to become a witness in a criminal case. Officer Riley looked up from his notebook and surveyed the crowd with those sharp cop eyes. Like I said, nobody leaves. This is now an active investigation. The blue lights from his patrol car were still flashing, casting everything in alternating shadows and harsh light, making the whole scene look surreal, like something from a TV crime show instead of a birthday party in suburbia. But it was real. Finally, terrifyingly, completely real. The ambulance ride was a blur of sirens, radio chatter, and Cassidy's steady voice talking me through every bump and turn. They had me strapped to that yellow backboard tighter than a Christmas present, my head immobilized between these foam blocks that made me feel like I was trapped in some kind of medical straitjacket. Every pothole we hit sent a jolt through my body that I could feel in my upper back, but nowhere else. A constant reminder that something was seriously, fundamentally wrong with me. East Haven General looked exactly like every hospital I'd ever seen in movies. All glass and concrete, and that sterile, antiseptic smell that hits you the moment the ambulance doors open. But this wasn't a movie. This was my life, and I was being wheeled through those automatic doors on a gurney, staring up at fluorescent lights that seemed to stretch on forever. The ER was surprisingly quiet for a Saturday evening. Cool, efficient, with that hushed urgency that hospitals do so well. Nurses in colorful scrubs moved around like they had choreographed every step, and everyone seemed to know exactly what they were doing except me. I was just cargo at this point, being transferred from one set of professionals to another like a package being delivered. They wheeled me into a room that smelled like disinfectant and fear. The walls were that hospital beige that's supposed to be calming, but just makes everything feel sterile and cold. There was a clock on the wall that ticked loud enough to count off the seconds of my terror, and a window that looked out onto the parking lot where normal people were living their normal lives. Dr. Neil Patterson introduced himself while the nurses were hooking me up to various machines that beeped and hummed like some kind of electronic orchestra. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 45, with graying hair and the kind of calm bedside manner that probably took years to perfect. "Everett, I'm Dr. Patterson," he said, pulling up a chair so he could sit at eye level with me. "I understand you've had quite an ordeal today. The paramedics filled me in on what happened, but I'd like to hear it from you. Can you tell me about the fall?" So I told him. Again, the whole story, Brent grabbing me, spinning me, throwing me backward onto those concrete steps. The crack I heard when I hit. The way my legs just stopped working. Dr. Patterson listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on his tablet, nodding in all the right places. "We're going to need to get some images," he said when I finished. "Starting with an MRI of your spine. I know that sounds scary, but we need to see exactly what we're dealing with before we can make any decisions about treatment." Scary didn't begin to cover it. I'd never had an MRI before, but I'd heard about them. The loud noises, the confined spaces, the way they could see inside your body and tell you things you didn't want to know. But what choice did I have? I couldn't feel my legs, couldn't move anything below my waist. I needed answers, even if those answers were going to destroy my life. The MRI machine looked like something from a science fiction movie. This huge white tunnel that hummed with barely contained energy. They slid me in there like I was being fed to some kind of technological monster, and for the next 45 minutes, I listened to sounds that belonged in a construction site, not a hospital. Banging, whirring, clicking, like someone was building a house around my head. I tried not to think about what they might find. Tried not to imagine the worst-case scenarios that kept playing in my head like a broken record. Wheelchair, paralysis, never walking again, never being able to work, to support myself, to be anything other than a burden. When they finally pulled me out of that machine, Dr. Patterson was waiting with another doctor, a woman this time, older, with silver hair and the kind of serious expression that makes your stomach drop before anyone says a word. "Everett, "This is Dr. Celeste Warren," Dr. Patterson said. "She's our spine specialist, and she's been reviewing your images." Dr. Warren pulled up a chair on the other side of my bed and opened a tablet that showed what looked like cross-sections of my back. Black and white images that meant nothing to me, but apparently told her everything she needed to know. "Everett," she said, her voice gentle but direct, "you have a fresh fracture in your lumbar spine, specifically at the L2 vertebra. That's what's causing your current symptoms." A fracture. I'd broken my back. The words hit me like another fall, another crack against concrete. But Dr. Warren wasn't finished. However, that's not all we found. She swiped to different images on her tablet, pointing to areas that looked damaged even to my untrained eye. "We discovered 3 older fractures in your spine as well. L4, T9, and T11. These are old injuries, Everett. Some of them appear to be months old, possibly even years." The room started spinning. Not metaphorically, literally spinning, like I was back on that pool deck being thrown around by Brent. But this was worse than being thrown. This was my entire past being rewritten in black and white medical images. "Old injuries." I managed to whisper. "Yes," Dr. Patterson said, leaning forward. "All of these fractures show signs of repeated blunt force trauma. They're in different stages of attempted healing, which suggests they occurred at different times over an extended period." Repeated blunt force trauma. The clinical language made it sound so sterile, so objective. But I knew what it meant. All those times Brent had played with me. All those falls downstairs that Tracy said were just me being clumsy. All those times I'd hit walls or furniture during his games and been told I was being dramatic when I complained about the pain. My spine had been keeping score this whole time. Every shove, every throw, every accident that wasn't really an accident. It was all there in those MRI images, documented in bone and tissue like a medical rap sheet. "The trampoline," I said suddenly, the memory hitting me like a physical blow. "Last summer, Brent said we should wrestle on the trampoline. I fell off, hit the frame. Tracy said I was fine. The stairs," I continued, more memories flooding back. 3 months ago, I fell down the stairs at their house. Brent said I tripped, but he was right behind me. I couldn't sit up straight for a week." Dr. Warren and Dr. Patterson exchanged a look that I was starting to recognize. The look that meant they'd seen this before, that they knew exactly what those old fractures represented. "Everett," Dr. Warren said quietly, "your spine is telling us a story. And it's not a story about accidents." The knock on my hospital room door came around 8 that evening, just as the nurses were switching shifts and the hallway was getting that quiet, settled feeling that hospitals get after visiting hours. I was still processing everything the doctors had told me, trying to wrap my head around the fact that my own body had been documenting years of abuse without me even realizing it. "Everett." A woman's voice, professional but not unkind. "I'm Detective Anika Ford with the Metro Police Department. Mind if I come in?" Detective Ford was not what I'd expected. Maybe it was all those cop shows on TV, but I'd been picturing some grizzled old guy with a 5 o'clock shadow and a bad attitude. Instead, she was maybe 40, with short natural hair and intelligent brown eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She wore a simple black blazer and carried herself with the kind of quiet confidence that comes from knowing exactly what you're doing. "Officer Riley asked me to follow up on what happened at the party today," she said, pulling up the visitor's chair and settling in like she had all the time in the world. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck," I said, which was probably the most honest thing I'd said all day. Except the truck's name was Brent, and apparently it's been hitting me for years. She smiled at that. Not a happy smile, but the kind of smile that said she'd heard worse stories and wasn't shocked by mine. "I've been doing this job for 15 years, Everett. I've seen a lot of things. What I'm seeing here tonight is a pattern, and patterns tell stories." She pulled out a tablet and opened what looked like a video file. "Before we get into the details, I want to show you something. One of the guests at the party recorded what happened. Are you up for watching it?" I nodded, even though part of me didn't want to see it. Didn't want to watch my own humiliation and pain played back in high definition. But another part of me, the part that had been called dramatic and attention-seeking for years, needed to see the proof. The video was shaky, obviously shot on someone's phone, but it captured everything. There I was, standing by the pool in my work clothes, clearly trying to stay out of the way. You could see me backing up when Brent approached, could hear me saying no, could see the exact moment when he grabbed my arm anyway. Let's show the guests some fun. Brent's voice was crystal clear on the recording, loud and boisterous like he was performing for an audience. Then came the spin. Watching it from the outside was somehow worse than living it. I could see how helpless I looked, how completely at Brent's mercy. The way he threw me wasn't playful. It was violent, deliberate, like he was trying to hurt me and didn't care who saw it. The crack when I hit those concrete steps was audible even through the phone's tiny speaker. Sharp and final, like a gunshot. And then came the worst part, the laughter. So much laughter, while I lay there unable to move. "Stop being such a baby." Tracy's voice cut through the recording, dripping with contempt and embarrassment. You could see her in the background, rolling her eyes, more concerned about what the other guests thought than about her husband lying motionless in the pool. Detective Ford paused the video. "What do you see when you watch this, Everett?" "I see assault," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "I see my brother-in-law attacking me while my wife stood by and let it happen. That's exactly what I see too." She made some notes on her tablet. "Officer Riley told me you mentioned this wasn't the first time something like this had happened. The doctors showed me your MRI results. 3 old fractures, all consistent with the kind of trauma we just watched." So I told her everything. The trampoline incident where Brent had wrestled me off the edge and I'd hit the metal frame hard enough to crack a rib. Though we hadn't known it was cracked at the time, because Tracy convinced me I was being dramatic about the pain. The stairs at Thanksgiving where Brent had accidentally bumped into me from behind and sent me tumbling down a full flight of concrete steps. The pool party 2 summers ago where he'd held me underwater as a joke until I nearly passed out. Every time, there was an excuse. Every time, it was just Brent being Brent, just family fun that went a little too far. Every time, I was the one being too sensitive, too dramatic, too unable to take a joke. "What about your wife?" Detective Ford asked. "What was her reaction to these incidents?" That was the hardest part to talk about, because while Brent was the one physically hurting me, Tracy was the one who made sure I never fought back, never complained, never stood up for myself. She was the one who convinced me that this was normal, that this was just how her family showed affection. She always took his side, I said. Always. If I complained about getting hurt, she'd tell me I was embarrassing her. If I tried to avoid his games, she'd say I was being antisocial. She made me feel like I was the problem for not wanting to be thrown around by her brother. Detective Ford nodded like she'd heard this story before. That's called enabling, Everett. And in some jurisdictions, it can be considered a form of abuse itself. Your wife had a duty to protect you, and instead she participated in a pattern of harm that went on for years. A pattern of harm. That phrase hit me like another revelation. Because that's exactly what it was. Not a series of accidents or pranks gone wrong, but a deliberate, sustained campaign of violence that had been normalized and excused until I didn't even recognize it as abuse. The good news, Detective Ford continued, is that we have everything we need to make this case. The video evidence is clear and unambiguous. The medical evidence shows a documented pattern of injuries. We have witness statements from the party guests, including the paramedic who treated you. She paused and looked at me directly. Based on the evidence, we're filing charges against Brent for assault with bodily harm. Given the severity of your injuries and the pattern we've uncovered, we're also looking at charges of aggravated assault and potentially domestic violence by proxy. What about Tracy? I asked. That's more complicated, but we're building a case for spousal neglect and obstruction of justice. She actively prevented you from seeking help for previous injuries and created an environment where the abuse could continue unchecked. I felt something I hadn't felt in years, validation. Someone with authority was finally telling me that what had happened to me was wrong, that I wasn't being dramatic or oversensitive, that I deserved better than being used as entertainment by my wife's family. What happens now? I asked. Detective Ford closed her tablet and stood up. Now we make sure this never happens to you again. And we make sure Brent faces consequences for what he's done, not just today, but for years. She handed me her card. If you remember anything else, any other incidents, call me. Your spine has been keeping records, Everett. Now it's time for the legal system to do the same. The news that they'd arrested Brent hit the family like a bomb going off in a quiet neighborhood. I found out around midnight when Tracy came storming into my hospital room, her face red with fury and her voice shaking with the kind of rage I'd seen her direct at store clerks and restaurant servers, but never quite at me. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" she hissed, keeping her voice low enough that the nurses wouldn't hear, but loud enough that I got the full force of her anger. "They arrested my brother, Everett. They put him in handcuffs in front of the neighbors." Mrs. Henderson was outside watering her plants and saw the whole thing. Mrs. Henderson. Of course that's what she was worried about, what the neighbors would think, how this would look to her precious social circle. Not that her husband was lying in a hospital bed with a broken spine, but that the family's reputation might take a hit. "Tracy," I started, but she cut me off with a wave of her hand. "Don't. Just don't. This is exactly the kind of dramatic bullshit I should have expected from you. You couldn't just let it go, could you? Couldn't just accept that it was an accident and move on like a normal person would. An accident. Even now, even with me lying here paralyzed from the waist down, she was still calling it an accident. Like the MRI images showing years of fractures were somehow my imagination. Like the video evidence was some kind of elaborate hoax I'd staged for attention. "The doctors found 3 other fractures in my spine," I said, trying to keep my voice calm and reasonable. "Old ones, Tracy. From all those other times your brother played with me. This isn't about one incident. This is about years of abuse that you helped cover up." Her laugh was sharp and bitter, the kind of sound that could cut glass. "Abuse? Oh, that's rich. You're calling normal family roughhousing abuse now? Jesus Christ, Everett, no wonder you can't handle a real job or make real friends. You're too busy playing the victim to actually live your life." There it was, the same pattern that had kept me trapped for years, turning my pain into my failure, making my injuries into character flaws, making me the problem for getting hurt instead of addressing the person who was doing the hurting. But something was different now. Maybe it was the painkillers. Maybe it was finally having medical professionals and law enforcement take me seriously. Or maybe it was just that I'd hit rock bottom and had nowhere left to fall. Whatever it was, I found myself speaking up in a way I never had before. "He threw me into concrete steps, Tracy. On purpose. And you stood there and watched it happen. You told me to walk it off when I couldn't feel my legs. What kind of wife does that? The kind of wife who's married to a man who makes everything about himself," she shot back. "Do you know what this is going to do to my family? To my career? I work in public relations, Everett. How do you think it's going to look when people find out my husband is pressing charges against my brother for playing around at a family party? Her career, her family, her reputation. Not once in this entire conversation had she asked how I was feeling, whether I was in pain, what the doctors had said about my prognosis. It was all about her and how my injury was inconveniencing her life. That's when Officer Riley appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. "Mrs. Henderson, I need to speak with you." Tracy turned toward him with that fake smile she used on authority figures, the one that said she was a reasonable person who could surely work out any misunderstanding. "Officer, I think there's been some confusion about what happened today. My husband tends to exaggerate." "Ma'am, you're under investigation for spousal neglect and obstruction of justice," Riley said, cutting through her charm offensive like a knife through butter. "Detective Ford has been reviewing the case, and your behavior both today and over the past several years suggests a pattern of enabling abuse and preventing your husband from seeking appropriate medical care." The color drained from Tracy's face so fast I thought she might faint. That's ridiculous. I would never." "You told a man with a spinal injury to walk it off," Riley continued. "You dismissed his pain as attention-seeking behavior. You actively discouraged him from reporting previous injuries. That's not spousal support, ma'am. That's criminal negligence." Tracy looked at me like this was somehow my fault, like I'd orchestrated this whole thing just to make her life difficult. "Everett, tell him. Tell him I'm not. Tell him this is all a misunderstanding." But I couldn't, because it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was exactly what it looked like. A woman who'd spent years enabling her brother's violence against her husband because it was easier than confronting the truth about her family. The explosion came around 2 in the morning. Not literally, though it felt like it, but emotionally, when my phone started buzzing with text messages from Tracy's extended family. Marissa was furious that her birthday party had been ruined by my drama. Their parents were threatening to sue me for defamation. Cousins and aunts and uncles I barely knew were weighing in with their opinions about what a troublemaker I was, how I'd always been jealous of Brent, how I was tearing the family apart with my lies. The messages kept coming, each one more vicious than the last. They painted me as a manipulative, attention-seeking liar who'd fabricated years of abuse just to destroy an innocent man's life. They said I was weak, pathetic, undeserving of the Henderson family name. They said Tracy deserved better than a husband who would betray her family like this. I was drowning in their anger, suffocating under the weight of their collective denial, when I heard a knock at my door. Soft, tentative, nothing like the aggressive entrance Tracy had made earlier. Everett. The voice was familiar but distant, like hearing someone calling your name from the other side of a lake. It's Talia, my sister. I hadn't seen Talia in almost 2 years. Not since Tracy had convinced me that she was jealous of our marriage and trying to cause problems between us. Looking back now, I realized that Tracy had been systematically isolating me from anyone who might have questioned what was happening to me. Talia stepped into the room cautiously, like she wasn't sure she'd be welcome. She looked older than I remembered, her brown hair streaked with gray, worry lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. But when she saw me lying there in that hospital bed, her face crumpled with a pain that looked almost physical. "Oh, Everett," she whispered, and suddenly she was beside my bed, taking my hand in both of hers. I heard what happened. I came as soon as I could. "Talia," I said, and to my surprise, my voice came out cracked and broken. "I'm so sorry. For everything. For staying away, for not calling for." "Stop," she said firmly. "You don't apologize to me. I should have tried harder to stay in touch. I should have seen what was happening. I always knew something was off about Tracy, about that whole family, but I didn't know how bad it was." She pulled her chair closer to my bed and leaned forward, her eyes intense and focused. "I want you to know something, Everett. I never stopped loving you. I never stopped worrying about you. And I never believed for 1 second that you deserved the way they treated you. For the first time in years, maybe for the first time since I'd married Tracy, someone from my family was telling me that I mattered, that I was worth protecting, that I deserved better than what I'd been getting. And for the first time since this whole nightmare started, I cried. The surgery came 3 days later. Dr. Warren explained it like she was talking about fixing a car engine, rods and screws and fusion procedures that would stabilize my spine and hopefully give me the best shot at walking again. Best shot being the operative phrase, because nobody could promise me anything except pain and a long road to recovery. I woke up from the anesthesia feeling like I'd been hit by that same truck all over again, except this time it had backed up and run me over a few more times for good measure. The incision in my back felt like someone had taken a blowtorch to my spine, and the drugs they gave me for the pain made everything fuzzy and distant, like I was watching my life happen to someone else. But the worst part wasn't the physical pain, it was the fear. Every day, I'd stare down at my legs under those hospital blankets and will them to move, to twitch, to give me some sign that the surgery had worked. Some days I swore I could feel something, a tingling or a twinge, but the doctors warned me that phantom sensations were common and didn't necessarily mean anything. That's when Dr. Amelia Rojas entered my life like a drill sergeant in scrubs. She was maybe 5'0" but carried herself like she could bench press a pickup truck, with graying hair pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail and the kind of direct stare that made you sit up straighter even when you were lying flat on your back. "Everett," she said on our first day, "I'm your physical therapist, and I'm going to tell you something right now that might piss you off. This is going to be the hardest thing you've ever done in your life. There are going to be days when you want to quit, when you want to give up and accept that this is as good as it gets. But I'm not going to let you." She was right about it being hard. Jesus Christ, was she right? The first week, all we did was try to get me sitting up without passing out. My balance was shot, my core strength was non-existent, and every movement felt like my spine was being twisted with a wrench. I threw up twice the first day, just from the effort of staying upright. Your body remembers pain, Dr. Rojas would say during the sessions that left me sweating and shaking. Now we need to teach it to remember strength. Meanwhile, Dr. Priya Jain was working on my head while Dr. Rojas worked on my body. She was younger than I'd expected for a trauma counselor, maybe 35, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a voice that made you feel like you could tell her anything. "You weren't weak," she told me during one of our sessions. You were systematically manipulated to believe you deserved the treatment you received. That's not weakness, Everett. That's psychological abuse. And it's just as real as the physical injuries. She helped me put words to things I'd never been able to articulate. The way Tracy would gaslight me into thinking my pain wasn't real. The way Brent's games always seemed to escalate when I tried to set boundaries. The way the whole family would close ranks and make me feel crazy for objecting to behavior that any normal person would recognize as abusive. The breakthrough came 6 weeks after surgery. I was in the physical therapy room, strapped into this contraption that was supposed to help me learn to balance again, when Dr. Rojas told me to try to stand. I'd been trying to stand for weeks with no success, my legs hanging like dead weight no matter how hard I concentrated. But something was different that day. When I focused all my energy on pushing down through my feet, I felt something. Not normal sensation, not anything close to what I used to feel, but something. A connection between my brain and my legs that hadn't been there before. Holy shit, I whispered as I managed to support some of my own weight for about 3 seconds before collapsing back into the safety harness. Dr. Rojas was grinning like she'd just won the lottery. Did you feel that? I felt something, I said. And for the first time since this whole nightmare started, I felt something else too. Hope. The courthouse was nothing like I'd expected. Maybe I'd watched too many legal dramas, but I'd pictured something grand and intimidating. Instead, it was just a regular building with fluorescent lights and worn carpet that smelled like old coffee and anxiety. But walking into that courtroom, with my cane and my unsteady gait, felt like walking into the most important moment of my life. Brent's lawyer was exactly what you'd expect from someone defending a rich kid's assault case. Expensive suit, slicked back hair, and the kind of condescending smile that said he thought this whole thing was beneath him. During opening statements, he painted Brent as a fun-loving family man whose harmless prank had been blown out of proportion by an oversensitive brother-in-law with a history of dramatic behavior. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he said, gesturing toward Brent like he was showcasing a prize pupil. This was nothing more than typical family horseplay that unfortunately resulted in an accident. My client never intended to cause harm, and the prosecution's attempt to criminalize normal sibling behavior is frankly ridiculous. Normal sibling behavior. Even in a courtroom, they were still trying to make this my fault for not being able to take a joke. But then the evidence started rolling in, and their story fell apart like a house of cards in a hurricane. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Sandra Martinez, methodically laid out the case piece by piece. First came the video footage from the party, played on a big screen where everyone could see exactly how violent Brent's prank had been. The courtroom was dead silent as they watched me being spun and thrown like a rag doll. You could hear Brent's laughter on the recording, could see the deliberate force he used, could watch the exact moment my body slammed into those concrete steps. There was nothing playful about it. Then came Dr. Warren with the MRI images. She put up those black and white pictures of my spine on a screen and walked the jury through each fracture like she was reading a medical textbook. 3 previous fractures, all consistent with blunt force trauma. L4, T9, T11. These injuries occurred over a period of several years and show a clear pattern of repeated abuse. When it was my turn to testify, I was terrified my voice would shake or I'd stumble over my words. But as I sat in that witness chair, looking out at the jury, something clicked. These people deserve to hear the truth, not the sanitized family version, not the victim-blaming bullshit I'd been fed for years, but the actual truth about what had happened to me. I told them about the trampoline incident, the stairs, the pool games that weren't really games. I explained how every injury had been dismissed. Every complaint had been turned back on me as evidence of my weakness or dramatic nature. Brent didn't just hurt me that day at the pool, I said, my voice steady and clear. He'd been hurting me for years, and my wife's family had been teaching me that it was my fault for not being tough enough to take it. Dr. Jane's testimony was devastating. She explained trauma bonding, gaslighting, and the psychological manipulation that keeps abuse victims trapped in cycles of violence. She made it clear that my reluctance to fight back or report previous incidents wasn't weakness. It was a predictable response to sustained psychological abuse. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When they read the verdict, guilty on all counts, Brent's face went white. His lawyer immediately started talking about appeals, but the judge wasn't having it. "Mr. Henderson," Judge Patricia Monroe said, looking directly at Brent, "you have shown a pattern of violence toward your brother-in-law spanning several years. Your actions were deliberate, calculated, and resulted in serious bodily harm. This court sentences you to 5 years in state prison." Tracy got 18 months probation and court-ordered counseling for enabling abuse. As they led Brent away in handcuffs, Judge Monroe's closing words echoed through the courtroom. "You mocked his pain, dismissed his suffering, and treated him as less than human. But he survived your cruelty, and now justice has been served." 18 months later, I'm standing in my own kitchen making coffee in my own apartment, and I still can't quite believe this is my life now. The place isn't much, a one-bedroom in a decent neighborhood with hardwood floors that creak when I walk in windows that actually let in sunlight. But it's mine. Nobody here tells me I'm being dramatic when I need to rest my back. Nobody dismisses my pain or makes jokes about my limp. The limp is permanent, according to Dr. Warren. Some days it's barely noticeable. Other days I need the cane to get around without looking like I'm drunk. But I'm walking. Against all odds, against the initial prognosis that had me preparing for life in a wheelchair, I'm walking on my own 2 feet. The job at the Metro Men's Outreach Center started as volunteer work, something Dr. Jane suggested to help me process my own trauma by helping others work through theirs. Turns out, there are a lot of guys out there who've been told their pain doesn't matter, who've been convinced that speaking up about abuse makes them weak or dramatic. "You taught me to trust the quiet ones," Samantha told me last week when she stopped by the center. She's working as a trauma nurse now at East Haven General, and she makes a point of really listening to patients who aren't making a lot of noise about their pain. The ones who say they're fine when they're clearly not fine. "You taught me that quiet doesn't mean okay." I still get emails from Tracy. She's in therapy now, court-ordered at first, but she says she's continuing it voluntarily. Her messages have evolved from angry blame to something that might eventually resemble an apology, though we're not there yet. Her latest email accused me of wrecking everything by pressing charges, but there was less venom in it than before. Maybe that's progress. I don't respond to her messages anymore. Dr. Jane calls it protective boundaries, and I call it sanity. I didn't wreck anything. I just finally told the truth about what was already broken. The MRI scans are framed on my wall now. I know that sounds weird, but hear me out. Those black and white images of my fractured spine aren't just medical records. They're proof. Proof that I wasn't making it up, wasn't being dramatic, wasn't weak for not fighting back. Every crack in those vertebrae is documentation of survival. Sometimes people ask me if I'm angry about the years I lost, the pain I endured, the family that threw me away rather than acknowledge what they'd done to me. The honest answer is that some days I am angry, but mostly I'm just grateful. Grateful that Samantha knew what she was looking at when I couldn't move my legs. Grateful that Dr. Warren could read the story my spine was telling. Grateful that Detective Ford believed me when I finally found the courage to speak up. I was told to walk it off, to stop being a baby, to quit making everything about me. Now I walk on my own terms, at my own pace, toward a future I'm building for myself. Every step I take is proof that they were wrong about me. My spine may have been broken, but my voice is whole now, and that makes all the difference. My fiancé texted, "Wedding's still on, but I'm spending the last few nights before with my ex-boyfriend for closure." I replied, "Do what you need to do." Then I called the venue and canceled everything. She found out at her bachelorette party when the venue called her about the cancellation, and then Wednesday afternoon hit me like a freight train carrying nothing but disappointment and lukewarm coffee. I was sitting at my desk in downtown Chicago, contemplating whether the fluorescent lights above me were specifically designed to suck the soul out of corporate drones like myself, when my phone decided to detonate my entire existence. I'd just wrapped up 3 back-to-back client meetings that felt like medieval torture sessions disguised as strategic planning discussions, and honestly, I was already questioning my life choices before my phone even buzzed. The notification popped up from Brooke Patterson, my fiancée, my supposed ride or die, the woman I was planning to legally bind myself to in exactly 3 days. 3 days. I was expecting the usual sweet nonsense she'd been bombarding me with for weeks. You know, the typical bride-to-be chaos. Did you confirm the flowers? Or my mom wants to move table 6 closer to the band? Or do you think ivory napkins clash with champagne tablecloths? The kind of questions that made me wonder if wedding planning was actually a form of advanced psychological warfare designed to break strong men. Instead, I got this absolute masterpiece of human audacity. Wedding's still on, but I'm spending the last few nights before with my ex-boyfriend for closure. I blinked at the screen like it was written in ancient hieroglyphics. Read it again. Nope, still said the same thing. My brain did that thing where it completely short-circuits and you just sit there like a deer in headlights. Except the headlights are attached to a garbage truck heading straight for your dignity. Derek. She was talking about Derek Morrison, the walking disaster she claimed she'd completely erased from her life like a bad tattoo. The guy she swore up and down was ancient history and totally irrelevant to our relationship. The same Derek who mysteriously kept popping up in her social media likes, and who somehow always managed to be at the same bars we frequented. Pure coincidence, right? Sure, Brooke. And I'm secretly Batman that I sat there staring at this text message like it might suddenly rearrange itself into something that made sense. Maybe autocorrect had gone rogue. Maybe she meant to send this to her therapist, or her diary, or literally anyone else on the planet besides the man she was supposed to marry in 72 hours. But no, this was definitely meant for me, because apparently I'd been dating someone who thought closure with an ex was a totally normal pre-wedding activity. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard like they were afraid to make contact. What exactly does one say to that? Thanks for the heads up. Honey, have fun with your emotional baggage. Should I pick up condoms for you too while I'm out? Great idea. Nothing says ready for marriage like a sleepover with your ex. Instead, my apparently masochistic fingers typed out, "Do what you need to do." I hit send and immediately wanted to throw my phone into the Chicago River. What the hell was wrong with me? Why didn't I respond with the righteous fury this situation clearly deserved? Why wasn't I demanding explanations or setting boundaries or doing literally anything that resembled having a backbone? Her response came back faster than a boomerang. "You're the best, Marcus. So mature and secure. This is why I'm marrying you." Oh, the irony was absolutely delicious. She was marrying me because I was mature and secure enough to let her shack up with her ex-boyfriend right before our wedding. What a catch I was. So mature, so secure, so completely spineless that I'd just given my blessing to what was essentially sanctioned cheating with a side of emotional manipulation that I put the phone down on my desk and stared at it like it might explode. The office around me continued its usual Wednesday afternoon hum. Keyboards clicking, phones ringing, Karen from accounting laughing way too loudly at something that definitely wasn't that funny. Normal people doing normal things while my world imploded in real time via text message. The thing is, I knew instantly, and I mean immediately, like some kind of divine revelation, that the wedding was already dead. Not postponed, not complicated, not something we'd work through with couples therapy and awkward conversations. Dead, deceased, pushing up daisies. It had died the moment she hit send on that text, and honestly, it had probably been on life support for months. Because here's the thing about closure. It's the biggest load of crap ever invented by people who want to have their cake and eat it too. You don't need closure from someone you're truly over. You don't need to spend a few nights processing feelings that should have been handled before you accepted someone else's engagement ring. And you definitely don't announce this brilliant plan to your fiancé 3 days before the wedding like you're discussing dinner plans. Sitting there in my beige cubicle, surrounded by motivational posters about teamwork and synergy, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Clarity. Pure, crystalline clarity about exactly what I needed to do. The wedding was dead, but I was the only one who knew it yet. Brooke was off planning her little closure adventure, completely oblivious to the fact that she'd just handed me the perfect exit strategy wrapped in her own selfish delusions that I picked up my phone again and scrolled through my contacts. Time to start making some calls. The venue, the caterer, the florist, the DJ, every single vendor who was expecting to make our special day happen. Because if Brooke wanted closure, I was about to give her the most definitive closure she'd ever experienced. 3 days before what should have been the happiest day of my life, I was about to become a runaway groom. And honestly, I'd never felt more relieved about anything in my entire existence. My first call was to Lakeside Manor, the venue where we were supposed to pledge our eternal love in front of 150 witnesses who were about to get a front row seat to the greatest wedding cancellation in Chicago history. The phone rang twice before a cheerful voice answered. Lakeside Manor. This is Jennifer. How can I make your special day perfect? This is Marcus Grant, I said, my voice surprisingly steady for someone who was about to torch his entire future. Cancel everything for Saturday. The silence on the other end was so profound I could practically hear Jennifer's brain malfunctioning. I'm sorry, did you say cancel? As in, the entire wedding. That's exactly what I said. The whole shebang. Done. Finito. Over and out. Jennifer's professional composure cracked like a cheap vase hitting concrete. Mr. Grant, I have to remind you that with less than 72 hours notice, you'll forfeit the entire deposit, plus we'll need to charge you for, I don't care, I interrupted, feeling a weird sense of liberation wash over me. Charge whatever you want. Send the bill to Marcus Grant, same address you have on file. Just make sure nobody shows up expecting a wedding on Saturday, because it's not happening. After Jennifer finished sputtering about contracts and policies, I hung up and immediately dialed the honeymoon resort in Maui. Because nothing says dodged a bullet like canceling your romantic getaway to paradise where you would have spent a week pretending everything was fine while your new wife probably texted Derek about their amazing closure sessions. Aloha, Grand Wailea Resort. This is Kailani speaking. Hi Kailani, this is Marcus Grant. I need to cancel my honeymoon reservation for this weekend. Oh no, is everything okay? Did someone get sick? I almost laughed. You could say that. My fiancée came down with a severe case of needing closure with her ex-boyfriend, so we won't be needing that Ocean View suite after all. Poor Kailani didn't know what to do with that information. I'm so sorry to hear that, Mr. Grant. Let me check your cancellation policy. The next 2 hours became a masterclass in efficient relationship demolition. I called Bloom and Blossom Florists and told them to keep their overpriced roses. The DJ got the axe. Sorry, buddy. No need for your romantic playlist when the bride's making her own music with her ex. The caterer, Magnificent Meals, probably thought I'd lost my mind when I canceled their 5-course dinner for 150 people. But honestly, the only thing magnificent about this situation was how spectacularly it was falling apart. Each phone call felt like removing another weight from my shoulders. The photographer who was supposed to capture our magical moments canceled. The transportation company with their fancy vintage Rolls-Royce gone. The bar service that was going to keep everyone liquored up enough to pretend this was a good idea not happening. Even the stupid ice sculpture of 2 swans that Brooke insisted we needed because it was symbolic melted before it was even carved. The cake was the hardest call to make, not because I was emotional about it, but because Mrs. Henderson at Sweet Dreams Bakery had put her heart and soul into creating what she called a masterpiece of buttercream artistry. She'd been working on our 3-tier monstrosity for weeks, and I could hear her heart breaking through the phone when I told her to eat it herself or donate it to a homeless shelter. But Marcus, dear, I've already piped all the roses. The fondant bride and groom are perfect. Are you sure you can't work this out? Mrs. Henderson, the fondant groom is about to find himself in the same situation as the real one, abandoned for someone else. Trust me, this is for the best. By the time I was done making calls, my phone battery was dead and my conscience was surprisingly clear. I'd just systematically dismantled what was supposed to be the biggest day of my life, and instead of feeling devastated, I felt like I'd just escaped from prison. That's when I realized I needed to call Jordan Clark, my best man, and the only person stupid enough to agree to stand up there with me while I made the biggest mistake of my life. Jordan answered on the first ring, probably expecting some last-minute groomsman logistics. Yo, Marcus, please tell me you're not calling about the bachelor party again. I already told you, what happens in Vegas definitely did not stay in Vegas, and I have the photos to prove it. Jordan, I said, I need you to sit down. Dude, I'm at work. I can't just... Sit down, Jordan. Trust me on this one. I heard the squeak of his office chair. Okay, I'm sitting. You're starting to freak me out, man. What's going on? Instead of explaining, I forwarded him Brooke's text message, the one that had started this whole beautiful disaster. Then I waited, listening to the sound of Jordan reading and processing what was probably the most audacious pre-wedding communication in human history. The silence stretched on for so long, I thought the call had dropped. Then, in a voice that sounded like he was speaking to a small child who'd just eaten paint chips, Jordan said, "She actually thought you'd say yes to that. Apparently, I'm just that mature and secure. Marcus, please tell me you didn't actually say yes to this insanity. I told her to do what she needed to do. Another pause. And then I canceled everything. The wedding's off, Jordan. Completely, totally, 100% off. I could practically hear Jordan's grin through the phone. Holy shit, dude. You actually did it. You pulled the plug on the whole thing. I need you to call the groomsmen. Let them know they can return their tuxes and make other plans for Saturday. The Marcus and Brooke show has been permanently canceled. This is the best news I've heard all year, Jordan said. I mean, I'm sorry you're going through this, but dude, you just dodged a nuclear missile. I'll call everyone right now. Thanks, man. I owe you one. You don't owe me anything. You just gave me the best story I'll ever tell at parties for the rest of my life. After hanging up with Jordan, I packed my stuff from the apartment Brooke and I shared. It was amazing how little of my actual life was intertwined with hers. My clothes, my books, my coffee maker that she always complained was too loud in the mornings. Everything fit into 3 boxes and a suitcase that I left the engagement ring on the kitchen counter with a sticky note that read, "For closure." Then I walked out the door and never looked back. That night, while Brooke was out living her best bachelorette life downtown, completely oblivious to the fact that her wedding had been systematically dismantled like a house of cards in a hurricane, I was camped out at Jordan's apartment with him and his girlfriend Rachel, armed with enough snacks to survive a small apocalypse and the kind of morbid anticipation you usually reserve for watching disaster movies. Jordan's place was perfect for this kind of operation. A corner apartment with huge windows overlooking the city, a sectional couch that could comfortably seat a small army, and most importantly, excellent Wi-Fi for monitoring the incoming shitstorm. Rachel had gone full event coordinator mode, setting up what she called mission control on the coffee table, laptops, phone chargers, a notepad for keeping track of developments, and enough junk food to feed a fraternity house during finals week. This is either going to be the most epic meltdown in social media history, or absolutely nothing will happen and we'll all feel stupid, Rachel said, arranging bags of popcorn like she was preparing for a movie marathon. But honestly, based on what you've told us about Brooke, I'm betting on epic meltdown. Jordan was practically vibrating with excitement. Dude, I've been waiting for something like this my entire life. Remember in college when Sarah found out Brad was cheating through his Instagram story? This is going to be 10 times better. I had to admit, their enthusiasm was infectious. After spending months walking on eggshells around Brooke's increasingly dramatic wedding demands, it felt good to be around people who appreciated the sheer absurdity of what was happening. Plus, I'd already gone through the initial shock and anger during my vendor canceling spree. Now I was just curious to see how long it would take for reality to hit Brooke like a freight train carrying a load of her own poor life choices. I still can't believe she actually sent you that text, Rachel said, shaking her head. Like, what was the thought process there? Hey honey, I know we're getting married in 3 days, but I'm going to go bang my ex-boyfriend real quick for emotional reasons. Hope that's cool. The best part, Jordan added, is that she thought Marcus would just sit there and take it. Like he's some kind of doormat who'd be grateful she was even bothering to inform him about her extracurricular activities. I stretched out on the couch, feeling more relaxed than I had in weeks. You know what's funny? I think she genuinely believed I'd be okay with it. Like, in her mind, being mature and secure means letting your fiancé do whatever she wants without consequences. That's not mature, Rachel said. That's being a pushover. There's a difference between being understanding and being a human welcome mat. We'd strategically blocked Brooke and her entire wedding party from all our social media accounts, but Jordan had kept his phone open to monitor the situation. He'd set up a whole system, screenshots, screen recordings, the works. The man was more prepared than a war correspondent heading into a combat zone. So what's the timeline here? Rachel asked, consulting her notepad like she was planning a military operation. When do you think she'll figure out the wedding's been canceled? I checked my watch. The bachelorette party started at 7. Knowing Brooke, they'll spend the first few hours taking photos for Instagram, drinking overpriced cocktails, and talking about how blessed she is. The venue's automated system sends cancellation confirmations at 9:30, so we've got about an hour and a half of peace before all hell breaks loose, Jordan finished. Assuming she even checks her email during the party, Rachel pointed out. Some people actually put their phones away during special events. Jordan and I looked at her like she'd just suggested people might stop breathing for fun. You've met Brooke, right? Jordan said. The woman who live tweeted her own engagement? She's not putting her phone away for anything. He was right, of course. Brooke was the kind of person who documented every moment of her life like she was running for president and needed proof of all her activities. Her Instagram story probably had more updates than a breaking news feed during a natural disaster. Plus, I added, she specifically requested to be copied on all vendor communications. She wanted to stay in the loop and make sure nothing went wrong. Well, congratulations, Brooke. You're definitely going to stay in the loop. We settled in to wait, making predictions about how the night would unfold. Rachel thought Brooke would call me first, probably screaming. Jordan was betting on a complete social media meltdown with angry posts and dramatic proclamations. I was leaning toward a full-scale family intervention, complete with her mother Helen showing up at Jordan's door, demanding explanations. What I don't understand, Rachel said, opening a bag of chips, is why Derek went along with this plan. Like, what guy thinks it's a good idea to sleep with someone else's fiancée 3 days before their wedding? The kind of guy who's been trying to break them up for months, Jordan replied. Think about it. He gets to play the supportive ex-boyfriend while simultaneously sabotaging her relationship. It's actually kind of brilliant, in a completely psychotic way. Except he didn't count on Marcus having a spine, I pointed out. His whole plan depended on me being too pathetic to do anything about it. Their plan, Rachel corrected. Don't forget, Brooke was in on this too. She probably thought she could have her cake and eat it too. Marry you for stability and keep Derek around for whatever pathetic emotional validation she gets from him. The more we talked about it, the clearer it became that this whole situation had been brewing for months. All those times Derek mysteriously showed up places. All those conversations about closure and unresolved feelings. All those moments when Brooke seemed distracted or defensive when I asked about her past relationships. It hadn't been paranoia or insecurity on my part. It had been pattern recognition. You know what the really messed up part is? I said, grabbing a handful of popcorn. If she'd just been honest about still having feelings for Derek, we could have broken up like normal people. Instead, she decided to string me along right up until the wedding, like I was some kind of backup plan. That's what narcissists do, Rachel said matter-of-factly. They keep people around as options while they explore other opportunities. The engagement ring was probably just insurance in case things didn't work out with Derek. Jordan's phone buzzed with a notification, and we all froze like we'd been caught doing something illegal. He checked the screen and grinned. It's starting. At exactly 9:23 p.m., Jordan's phone lit up like a Christmas tree having an electrical malfunction. We'd been sitting there for over 2 hours, munching on snacks and making increasingly ridiculous predictions about how Brooke's night would implode, when the automated email system at Lakeside Manor decided to drop its little digital bomb right into her perfectly curated bachelorette party. Oh shit, here we go, Jordan said, his eyes glued to his phone screen. The venue just sent the cancellation notice. Rachel leaned over his shoulder, practically vibrating with anticipation. Did she see it yet? Give it a minute, I said, feeling weirdly calm about the whole thing. She's probably too busy posing for photos to check her email immediately. I was right, of course. Brooke's Instagram story had been updating every 15 minutes like clockwork since 7 o'clock. The progression was almost artistic in its predictability. Pre-party shots of her getting ready in a white satin robe that probably cost more than most people's rent. Arrival photos at the rooftop bar in matching Bride Tribe shirts that made everyone look like they were advertising a cult. Group shots with overpriced cocktails that came with sparklers because apparently regular drinks weren't extra enough for this crowd. Her maid of honor, Gretchen Morrison, yes, Derek's sister, because apparently this whole situation needed an extra layer of family drama, had been documenting everything with the enthusiasm of a war correspondent covering the liberation of Paris. The photos showed 12 women in various shades of pink and white, all grinning like they'd just won the lottery, while Brooke held court in the center wearing a tiara that looked like it came from a children's dress-up box. Look at this, Jordan said, showing us his screen. Posted 20 minutes ago. My girls got me the perfect tiara because I'm literally a princess tonight. 3 more days until I become Mrs. Grant. The irony is just chef's kiss. Then, at 9:31 p.m., The tone of Gretchen's posts took a sharp left turn into panic territory. Is Marcus with you guys tonight? Brooke's freaking out about something and won't tell us what's wrong. And there it is, Rachel said, clapping her hands together. The moment reality crashed into fantasy land. What happened next was like watching a car accident in slow motion. If car accidents involved designer cocktails and women in matching t-shirts instead of actual vehicles. Jordan kept screenshot capturing everything as the updates got progressively more frantic. Gretchen's posts went from confused to concerned to borderline hysterical in the span of about 10 minutes. OMG, something is seriously wrong. Brooke just locked herself in the bathroom and won't come out. She's crying and screaming about Marcus ruining everything. What is happening? The bathroom breakdown, I observed. Classic Brooke move. Whenever she can't control a situation, she retreats to the nearest lockable room and has a complete meltdown. Should we feel bad about this? Rachel asked, though her tone suggested she wasn't feeling particularly guilty. About what? About her finally facing the consequences of her own actions? Nah, I'm good, I replied, grabbing another handful of popcorn. The real entertainment started when Brooke's mother, Helen Patterson, began her assault on everyone's voicemail. Jordan had the brilliant idea to put his phone on speaker so we could all enjoy the increasingly unhinged messages as they came in. Message 1, 9:47 p.m. Jordan, this is Helen Patterson. I need you to call me immediately. There's been some kind of misunderstanding about the wedding arrangements, and I need to speak with Marcus right away. Message 2, 9:52 p.m. Jordan, I don't know what kind of childish game Marcus is playing, but he needs to stop this nonsense immediately. He's ruining my daughter's life over nothing. Call me back. Message 3, 10:08 p.m. This is absolutely ridiculous. Marcus is being completely unreasonable and childish. We have 150 guests flying in from all over the country, and he's throwing a tantrum like a spoiled brat. We'll sue him for every penny of those deposits if he doesn't fix this immediately. The legal threats, Rachel noted. Right on schedule. When narcissists can't manipulate, they always go straight to intimidation. Except all the contracts are in my name, I pointed out. Good luck suing me for canceling my own wedding. Message 4 was where Helen really let her true colors show. Fine, if that's how he wants to play it. We'll have the wedding without him. Brooke deserves better than some paranoid, insecure little boy who can't handle a mature woman having closure with her past. Oh, this is getting good, Jordan said, rubbing his hands together like he was about to watch his favorite movie. But the real cherry on top of this disaster Sunday came when Derek himself decided to get involved. At 10:23 p.m., he actually had the audacity to text Jordan directly, as if they were old buddies who regularly chatted about relationship drama. Hey man, can we talk? This whole thing is getting out of hand. Brooke is hysterical, and I think there's been a misunderstanding. Can you ask Marcus to call me? We need to have a man-to-man conversation about this. Jordan looked at me with raised eyebrows. Want me to respond? Go for it, I said. But keep it classy. Jordan's fingers flew over his keyboard. My guy, you literally told the groom you'd be sleeping over with his bride 3 days before the wedding. What exactly did you think would happen? That he'd send you a fruit basket and a thank you note? The response came back almost immediately. It's not like that. It's complicated. Brooke has unresolved feelings, and she needed closure before she could fully commit to Marcus. I was just trying to help her work through her emotions. Oh, how noble of you, Rachel said sarcastically. What a selfless act of service, sleeping with someone else's fiancé to help her work through her feelings. Jordan typed back, Dude, if you're going to home wreck, at least own it. Don't insult everyone's intelligence by pretending you're doing it out of the goodness of your heart. Meanwhile, the Instagram updates from the bachelorette party had completely stopped. The last post was from 9:19 p.m., a group shot of everyone toasting with champagne, captioned, To new beginnings and happily ever after. The timestamp made it even more perfect. They'd been celebrating right up until the moment the cancellation email arrived. I kind of feel bad for the other girls, Rachel said. They probably have no idea what's going on. They're just there to celebrate their friend's wedding, and suddenly, she's having a complete breakdown in a bathroom. Don't feel too bad, I replied. Half of them have been dealing with Brooke's drama for years. This is probably just Tuesday for them. By 10:45 p.m., the messages had stopped coming. Either Brooke's phone had died, she'd thrown it in the Chicago River, or someone had physically restrained her from sending any more unhinged communications. The silence was almost more ominous than the chaos had been. "Think it's over?" Rachel asked. Jordan and I looked at each other and started laughing. "Oh, this isn't even close to over," I said. "This is just the opening act. Tomorrow's going to be the real show." Thursday morning arrived with all the subtlety of a freight train carrying a cargo load of fresh bullshit, and Brooke was apparently the conductor. I woke up on Jordan's couch to 17 missed calls, 43 text messages, and what can only be described as the most creative work of fiction I'd ever seen posted on social media. Rachel was already up, nursing a cup of coffee and staring at her laptop screen with the kind of fascination usually reserved for watching natural disasters unfold. "Marcus," she said without looking up, "you need to see this." Brooke just posted what might be the most delusional thing I've ever read on Facebook. I shuffled over, still in yesterday's clothes and feeling like I'd been hit by a truck driven by my own poor life choices. On Rachel's screen was a Facebook post that had apparently gone live at 6:47 a.m., because nothing says stable mental state like crafting elaborate lies before most people have had their morning coffee. With a heavy heart, the post began, "I'm announcing that our wedding has been postponed due to Marcus's ongoing mental health struggles. Over the past few weeks, Marcus has become increasingly paranoid and has been making false accusations about my friendships and my past. While this is heartbreaking and devastating, I believe in standing by the people we love during their darkest moments. I'm committed to supporting Marcus through whatever he's going through, even if it means delaying our special day. Please keep us both in your thoughts and prayers during this difficult time. Love conquers all. Hashtag stand by your man. Hashtag mental health matters. Hashtag love wins." I stared at the screen for a full 30 seconds, my brain trying to process the sheer audacity of what I was reading. She's actually claiming I'm mentally ill because I didn't want her sleeping with her ex-boyfriend before our wedding? "It gets better," Jordan said, appearing from the kitchen with his own coffee. "Look at the comments. She's got a whole support network going of people who apparently think you're a controlling psychopath." Sure enough, the post already had 47 likes and 23 comments, mostly from people I'd never met offering their thoughts and prayers and praising Brooke for being such a strong, supportive woman during my apparent psychological breakdown. Her Aunt Diane had commented, "You're an angel for standing by him, sweetie. Some men just can't handle strong women." Her college roommate added, "Mental health is so important. You're doing the right thing by getting him help." "This is incredible," Rachel said, scrolling through the responses. "She's actually convinced people that you canceled your own wedding because you're having a nervous breakdown, not because she told you she was going to cheat on you. The best defense is a good offense," I said, feeling a familiar rage building in my chest. Can't be the villain if you paint yourself as the victim first. But here's the thing about the internet in 2025, screenshots are forever, and the truth has a way of surfacing faster than a dead fish in a shallow pond. I pulled out my phone and opened Facebook for the first time in months, because sometimes you have to fight fire with fire, and Brooke had just brought a flamethrower to what should have been a civil conversation. My post was simple, direct, and included all the receipts. No paranoia, no breakdown, no false accusations, just facts. My fiancée informed me via text that she would be spending her last 2 nights before our wedding with her ex-boyfriend for closure. I canceled our wedding. That's it. That's the whole story. Then I attached a screenshot of Brooke's original text message, timestamp and all, followed by another screenshot of her response calling me mature and secure for agreeing to let her bang Derek Morrison before we exchanged vows. That I hit post and sat back to watch democracy in action. The response was immediate and absolutely beautiful. Within 5 minutes, my post had more likes than Brooke's, and the comments were rolling in faster than I could read them. "Brooke told you what?" From my cousin Sarah. "Holy shit, dude, you dodged a bullet." From my college buddy Mike. "This woman is absolutely insane." From Rachel's sister, who I'd met exactly once at a barbecue. But the real nail in Brooke's coffin came from an unexpected source. Derek's father, Robert Morrison, had apparently been dealing with his own family drama and decided to share some information that completely obliterated whatever credibility Derek might have had left. Robert posted on his own Facebook page, and someone tagged me in it within minutes. "For anyone following the drama with my son Derek and the canceled Patterson Grant wedding, I feel compelled to share some facts. Derek has been lying to everyone, including the Patterson family, about having cancer. The medical emergency that supposedly brought him and Brooke back together? Complete fabrication. He's been using this lie to manipulate people for months. I found out yesterday when I called his oncologist to offer support. There is no oncologist. There is no cancer. There is no medical crisis. There's just my son being a manipulative piece of garbage, and I'm done covering for him. The post included photos from a golf tournament Derek had played in the weekend before, looking perfectly healthy and celebrating his hole-in-one with a beer that definitely wasn't prescribed by any cancer doctor. "Oh my God," Rachel said, reading over my shoulder. Derek's been faking cancer to get sympathy from Brooke. And now his own father is exposing him on social media, Jordan added. This keeps getting better and better. Within an hour, the entire narrative had flipped. Brooke's post was being shared and mocked across multiple friend groups, with people commenting things like, "Did you really think nobody would fact-check this?" And "Girl, the screenshots don't lie." Someone had even created a side-by-side comparison of her post and my screenshots with the caption, "When keeping it real goes wrong." The best part was watching Brooke try to control the damage in real time. She started deleting comments that didn't support her narrative, then deleted the entire post when the negative responses outnumbered the supportive ones. Then she posted again, this time claiming her account had been hacked and that someone was spreading lies about her. But the internet had already done its thing. Screenshots of her original post were circulating, along with my response and Derek's father's cancer revelation. The whole story was spreading faster than gossip at a small-town hair salon, and there was absolutely nothing Brooke could do to stop it. Her second post lasted about 20 minutes before she deleted that too. Then her third post, a rambling essay about toxic masculinity and emotional abuse, disappeared after 30 minutes. By noon, she'd given up on Facebook entirely and made her Instagram account private. But the damage was already done. My phone was buzzing constantly with messages from friends, family members, and even people I barely knew, all expressing their shock and support. "I never liked her anyway," my sister texted. "She always seemed fake." My mom called to make sure I was okay and to tell me she'd already told everyone at her book club what had happened. The best message came from my grandmother. "Good riddance to bad rubbish. Come over for dinner Sunday, and I'll make your favorite pot roast. You're better off without that floozy." Gotta love Grandma's no-nonsense approach to relationship advice. Thursday night at Jordan's apartment felt like being inside a fortress under siege, except instead of medieval armies, we were dealing with an angry mob of wedding guests who apparently thought showing up unannounced was a totally reasonable response to having their Saturday plans canceled. I was sprawled on the couch, finally starting to relax after watching Brooke's reputation get absolutely demolished on social media all day, when Jordan's Ring doorbell started going absolutely berserk. "What the hell?" Jordan said, checking his phone. "Someone's at the door." The video feed showed what can only be described as the most pathetic war party ever assembled. Leading the charge was Helen Patterson, Brooke's mother, dressed like she was heading to a country club board meeting rather than staging an intervention. Behind her stood Roger, Brooke's dad, looking like he'd rather be literally anywhere else on earth. Gretchen was there too, still wearing her Bride Tribe shirt from the night before, which was either dedication or a complete inability to read the room. And bringing up the rear, like the world's most unwelcome surprise guest, was Derek Morrison himself. But the real star of this shit show was Brooke, front and center, still wearing her bachelorette party tiara, because apparently accessories are the most important thing when you're having a public meltdown. "This is actually happening," Rachel whispered, peering over Jordan's shoulder at the phone screen. "They actually formed a posse and came here." The doorbell rang again, followed by aggressive knocking that sounded like Helen was trying to beat down the door with her perfectly manicured fists. Jordan pressed the intercom button on his phone, and suddenly we could hear the circus that was happening in his hallway. "Jordan Clark, I know you're in there." Helen's voice came through the speaker, shrill and demanding. "We need to speak with Marcus immediately. This has gone on long enough." "Ma'am, this is a private residence," Jordan replied through the intercom, his voice perfectly calm and professional. "You need to leave. Don't you dare ma'am me, young man." Helen shot back. "Do you have any idea what your friend has done?" We have 150 guests flying in from all over the country for a wedding that's supposed to happen in 2 days. Roger stepped forward, looking like he was about to negotiate a hostage situation. Jordan, please. We just want to talk. This whole thing has gotten completely out of hand. Maybe we can work something out. Work something out. I said to Jordan. What are we? Negotiating a business merger. Through the speaker, we could hear Brooke's voice, high-pitched and hysterical. Marcus is being completely unreasonable. All I wanted was closure. I wasn't going to actually do anything with Derek. Then why did you ask to spend 2 nights with him? Jordan asked through the intercom, and I had to give him credit for cutting straight to the heart of the matter. That's when Derek decided to chime in, because apparently this situation wasn't already ridiculous enough. Look, man, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Can we just talk this out, man to man? I know how this looks, but it's not what you think. Jordan looked at me with raised eyebrows. I shook my head and made a throat-slitting gesture. No way in hell was I having a man-to-man conversation with the guy who'd been plotting to sleep with my fiancée while pretending to have cancer. Derek, Jordan said into the intercom, you're literally the last person who should be talking to him right now. You told the groom you'd be sleeping over with his bride. What exactly did you think was going to happen? It's not like that. Derek protested. We have history. She needed to process her feelings before she could fully commit to someone else. By processing, you mean sleeping with her, Rachel called out, loud enough for the intercom to pick up. Gretchen's voice joined the chorus. This is all just a big misunderstanding. Brooke loves Marcus. She's always loved Marcus. Derek was just helping her work through some unresolved emotions. Unresolved emotions, I repeated. Is that what we're calling it now? The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, with Helen making increasingly ridiculous demands and threats. She wanted me to come downstairs and discuss this like adults. She wanted Jordan to stop enabling Marcus's childish behavior. She wanted the wedding to happen as planned because too much money had already been spent, and what would people think? The best part was when she started making legal threats again. We'll sue you. For emotional distress. We'll sue you for the deposits. We'll sue you for everything you're worth. Ma'am, Jordan replied, you can't sue someone for canceling their own wedding. Also, I'm pretty sure emotional distress requires proving that the person actually caused the distress, not just responded appropriately to it. That's when Brooke completely lost it. Through the intercom, we could hear her screaming at the top of her lungs. This is insane. I was doing Marcus a favor by marrying him. He should be grateful that someone like me even wanted to be with someone like him. And there it is, Rachel said quietly. The truth finally comes out. I could have had anyone. Brooke continued. Derek has been begging me to come back to him for years. I chose Marcus because I thought he was stable and secure, but he's just as crazy and jealous as every other guy I've dated. Wow, I said. She's really selling herself as quite the catch there. Roger's voice came through next, and for the first time, he sounded genuinely embarrassed. Brooke, honey, maybe we should go home and talk about this privately. No, she shrieked. I'm not leaving until Marcus comes down here and explains himself. He owes me that much. Actually, Jordan said through the intercom, he doesn't owe you anything. But I'll tell you what, security is on their way up, so you might want to start heading toward the elevator. That wasn't actually true, but it had the desired effect. We could hear Helen sputtering indignantly and Roger trying to convince everyone to leave before things got worse. Gretchen was arguing with Derek about whether they should wait for security or just leave, and through it all, Brooke was still screaming about how unfair everything was. The final nail in the coffin came when Derek tried one last desperate appeal. Marcus, if you're listening, just give me 5 minutes to explain. This whole thing got blown way out of proportion. Brooke and I have a connection that goes back years, and she needed to explore that before she could fully commit to you. I was just trying to help her be sure about her decision. Jordan's response was absolutely perfect. Dude, you just admitted you were trying to steal another man's fiancée. On camera, while standing outside his friend's apartment building. At 10 o'clock at night, wearing yesterday's clothes. Maybe it's time to reevaluate your life choices. Within 5 minutes, building security actually did show up, and we watched through the ring camera as the whole pathetic group was escorted toward the elevators. Brooke's last words, screamed over her shoulder as they disappeared from view, were, "You'll regret this forever, Marcus. You're making the biggest mistake of your life." Somehow, I said, settling back into the couch. I doubt that. Friday rolled around with all the pomp and circumstance of a funeral march, which was pretty fitting considering we were supposed to be having our rehearsal dinner at the Oakwood Country Club that evening. Instead of practicing wedding vows and toasting to our future happiness, I was sitting in Jordan's kitchen eating leftover Chinese takeout and watching Brooke's world continue to implode in spectacular fashion. The day started quietly enough. Too quietly, actually. After Thursday night's doorbell invasion, I was expecting some kind of escalation, but my phone had been surprisingly silent all morning. No angry texts, no voicemails from Helen threatening legal action, no social media posts claiming I'd been possessed by demons or abducted by aliens. It was almost unsettling. "This is the calm before the storm," Rachel said, sipping her coffee and scrolling through her phone. "Brooke's not the type to just give up and accept defeat. She's planning something." She was right, of course. At exactly 2:30 p.m., my phone rang with a call from the Oakwood Country Club. I recognized the number because I called them Wednesday to cancel our rehearsal dinner reservation, along with everything else on our wedding weekend itinerary. "Mr. Grant, this is Patricia from Oakwood Country Club," the voice said, sounding frazzled and confused. "I'm calling because we have a situation here, and I need to verify some information with you." "What kind of situation?" I asked, though I had a pretty good idea where this was heading. "Well, sir, we have a woman here claiming to be your fiancée, and she's insisting that your rehearsal dinner is still on for tonight. She's with an older woman who says she's the mother of the bride, and they're demanding that we honor your reservation. They're saying there was some kind of miscommunication about the cancellation." I could hear shouting in the background, and Patricia's voice dropped to a whisper. "Mr. Grant, I have to ask, did you actually cancel this reservation, or was there some kind of mistake?" "I absolutely canceled it," I said. "Wednesday afternoon, around 3 o'clock. I spoke with someone named Jennifer, I think. The reservation was completely canceled, and I was told there would be cancellation fees." "That's what our records show," Patricia confirmed. "But these women are insisting it's a mistake, and they're causing quite a scene. The older woman is demanding to speak with the manager and threatening to charge everything to your credit card." "My credit card?" I laughed. "Patricia, I need you to understand something very clearly. I am not getting married tomorrow. There is no wedding. There is no rehearsal dinner. These women are not authorized to use my credit card for anything, and if they try, it's fraud. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir, I understand completely. Should I call security?" Through the phone, I could hear Helen's voice getting louder and more indignant. "This is absolutely ridiculous. We've been planning this event for months. You cannot treat paying customers this way." "Patricia," I said, "yes, please call security. And if they refuse to leave, call the police. I want this documented in case they try to pull any more stunts." 20 minutes later, Patricia called me back. "Mr. Grant, I wanted to follow up. We did have to call the police to escort them off the property. The younger woman became quite belligerent when we explained that the reservation was canceled, and the older woman actually tried to physically push past our hostess to get to the private dining room." "Are you serious?" "Unfortunately, yes. The police report is being filed as trespassing and attempted fraud. They tried to force us to charge your card for services you'd already canceled. The officer said this kind of thing happens more often than you'd think with canceled weddings." I thanked Patricia and hung up, feeling a weird mix of vindication and secondhand embarrassment. How desperate do you have to be to show up at a venue you know has been canceled and try to force them to honor a reservation that doesn't exist? But the real entertainment came later that afternoon when my phone rang again, this time from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Marcus." The voice was hesitant, embarrassed. "This is Roger. Roger Patterson, Brooke's dad. The man who'd looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor during Thursday night's apartment invasion." "Hi, Roger," I said, genuinely curious about what he could possibly want to discuss. "Listen, son," he said, and I could hear the exhaustion in his voice. "I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. Is this really what you want? Is this how you want this whole thing to end?" For a moment, I almost felt bad for him. Roger had always seemed like a decent guy who'd gotten stuck in the middle of his wife and daughter's drama. But then I remembered why we were having this conversation in the first place. "Roger, did you see Brooke's text message? The one where she told me she was going to spend 2 nights with her ex-boyfriend before our wedding. Silence on the other end. Because I've got screenshots if you want to see them, I continued, along with her response calling me mature and secure for letting her do it. More silence. And did you know that Derek has been lying about having cancer? That the whole medical emergency that brought them back together was completely fake? A long sigh. Yeah, I saw Robert's post yesterday about Derek faking the cancer thing. So knowing all that, do you really think I should marry your daughter tomorrow? The pause stretched on for so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, Roger spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. No. I guess I wouldn't want my son to marry someone who did that to him. I appreciate your honesty, Roger. I really do. Marcus, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. I knew Helen was encouraging this whole closure thing with Derek. She thought he had money, thought maybe Brooke could do better. I should have said something, but... He trailed off. But what? But I've been thinking about divorce for 2 years, and I didn't want to rock the boat until after the wedding. Guess that doesn't matter now. Holy shit. Brooke's parents were getting divorced too? This day just kept getting better and better. I'm sorry to hear that, Roger. But maybe this is all for the best. For everyone. Yeah, he said sadly. Maybe it is. Take care of yourself, Marcus. You're a good kid, and you deserve better than this circus. After he hung up, I sat there staring at my phone, trying to process everything that had happened. In the span of 3 days, I'd canceled my wedding, watched my ex-fiancé have multiple public meltdowns, been threatened with lawsuits, had my mental health questioned on social media, gotten invaded by angry relatives, and now learned that my almost-in-laws were splitting up too. And somehow, despite all the chaos and drama, I felt better than I had in months. Everything okay? Jordan asked, walking into the kitchen. Yeah, I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. Everything's actually pretty great. Friday night was supposed to be our rehearsal dinner. Instead, I was sitting in Jordan's living room eating pizza and watching what can only be described as the most spectacular social media meltdown in human history unfold in real time on Instagram Live. If someone had told me a week ago that I'd be spending the night before my wedding watching my ex-fiancé have a complete psychological breakdown on the internet, I would have recommended they seek professional help. But here we were, living in the timeline where nothing made sense and everything was simultaneously horrible and hilarious. The IT started around 9 o'clock. Rachel was the first to notice, frantically waving her phone at us from across the room. Oh my God, you guys, Brooke just went live on Instagram. And she's drunk. Very, very drunk. The 3 of us huddled around Rachel's phone like we were watching the final episode of our favorite TV show. The video quality was shaky, clearly being filmed on a phone that wasn't being held steady, and the lighting was terrible. But there was Brooke, sitting on what was obviously Derek's couch. I recognized that hideous abstract art on the wall behind her from his social media posts, wearing her bachelorette party tiara and holding a glass of wine that was definitely not her first of the evening. Hi everyone. She slurred into the camera, her makeup smudged and her hair looking like she'd been running her hands through it for hours. I wanted to go live tonight to tell you all the truth about what's really happening with my wedding tomorrow. Oh, this is going to be good, Jordan said, settling in with his own slice of pizza. Marcus Grant, she continued, saying my name like it tasted bad, has completely ruined my life. All I wanted was closure with someone who meant a lot to me, and he turned it into this whole big thing. Like, literally all I wanted was to spend a couple nights with Derek to make sure I was making the right decision about getting married, and Marcus completely freaked out. The comments section was already going crazy. I could see them flying by. Most of them were not supportive. Girl, what are you even saying right now? Are you seriously admitting to cheating? This is why he left you. But Brooke was either too drunk or too delusional to notice. She kept going, digging her hole deeper with every word. People keep acting like I did something wrong, but I was trying to be honest. I could have just gone behind Marcus's back, but I told him what I was doing because I thought he was mature enough to understand. I thought he was secure enough in our relationship to let me have closure with my past. Let her have closure, Rachel repeated, with her past, while wearing his engagement ring. The train wreck continued for another 10 minutes, with Brooke alternating between crying and ranting about how unfair everything was. She talked about how Derek was the love of her life, but she'd chosen Marcus because he was stable and reliable. She complained about having to cancel all her wedding plans and how embarrassing it was to tell people the wedding was off. I could have had anyone, she said, taking another sip of wine. Derek has been wanting me back for years. He told me he'd do anything to be with me again. And I chose Marcus because I thought we could build a good life together. But he's just as jealous and insecure as every other guy I've dated. The comments were brutal. So you settled for him? You're literally at Derek's place right now. This is the worst apology video ever. But the absolute best part came when Derek himself appeared in the background of the video. You could see him in the kitchen, frantically gesturing for Brooke to stop talking. But she was completely oblivious. The comments immediately picked up on it. Is that Derek behind you? Girl, you're literally proving his point. That's when Brooke really lost it. Someone in the comments asked why she was at Derek's apartment if this was all just about closure, and she completely snapped. Because Marcus kicked me out, she screamed at the phone. He packed up all his stuff and left me with nothing. He canceled our apartment lease, and I had nowhere else to go. Derek is the only person who actually cares about me and supports me through this. Wait, I said, pausing with a piece of pizza halfway to my mouth. She's telling people I kicked her out? I left. She kept the apartment. Facts don't matter when you're having a mental breakdown on Instagram Live, Rachel pointed out. The video kept getting worse. Brooke started crying again, mascara running down her face, talking about how she'd given up so much for our relationship and how ungrateful I was. She claimed she'd turned down job opportunities and moved to Chicago just to be with me, which was interesting since she'd already been living here when we met and had never mentioned any job opportunities elsewhere. Then Derek made his big mistake. He tried to intervene, walking into frame and reaching for Brooke's phone. Babe, maybe you should stop. You're making this worse. Babe, Jordan repeated. Did he just call her babe on her live video? The comments section exploded. Did he just call you babe? You're literally with your ex right now. This is why Marcus left you. You're proving everything he said. But Brooke was too far gone to care. She turned the camera toward Derek, who looked like a deer caught in headlights. This is Derek, she announced. The man who actually loves me and supports me unconditionally. Unlike some people who run away the minute things get complicated. Derek's face went white. Brooke, turn off the phone. Please. No, she said, turning the camera back to herself. I want everyone to know the truth. Marcus is a coward who couldn't handle being with a real woman who has a past. Derek understands me. Derek accepts me for who I am. The whole thing devolved from there. Derek kept trying to get Brooke to end the video while she got increasingly belligerent and defensive. At one point, she actually started reading the negative comments out loud and responding to them, which just made everything worse. You're literally cheating right now, she read. I'm not cheating. I'm single. Marcus broke up with me, remember? I can do whatever I want. This is so embarrassing, she continued. Girl, stop talking. Why should I stop talking? Everyone wants to judge me, but nobody wants to hear my side of the story. The final nail in the coffin came when someone in the comments pointed out that Derek's apartment walls were visible behind her, and they'd seen his address posted on social media before. You're at Derek's place on what should have been your rehearsal dinner. The comment read that Brooke's response was to pan the camera around Derek's living room, showing off his terrible furniture and that god-awful abstract art. Yeah, I'm at Derek's place. So what? At least someone wants me here. The video finally ended when Derek physically took the phone away from her, but not before she managed to slur out one final message. Marcus Grant, if you're watching this, you're going to regret leaving me for the rest of your pathetic life. The silence in Jordan's living room was deafening. Well, Rachel said finally, that happened. Did she just confess to everything on live video? I asked. And then some, Jordan replied. I don't think she could have made herself look worse if she'd tried. By the time we went to bed, the video had been screen recorded and shared across multiple platforms. Whatever reputation Brooke had left was officially gone. Saturday morning dawned crisp and clear, the kind of perfect autumn day that wedding planners dream about and brides spend months praying for. Ironically, it was absolutely gorgeous weather for a wedding that was never going to happen. Instead of waking up in some overpriced hotel suite, surrounded by groomsmen making terrible jokes and downing mimosas to calm pre-wedding jitters, I was sitting on the deck of a mountain resort 2 hours outside Chicago, breathing in fresh pine air and feeling more at peace than I had in months. I'd driven up to Pine Ridge Lodge Friday night after Brooke's spectacular Instagram Live meltdown, needing to get as far away from the Chicago drama as possible. The resort was one of those places where people go to disconnect from reality. No cell service unless you're near the main lodge, hiking trails that make you forget civilization exists, and a general atmosphere of your problems can't find you here. It was exactly what I needed while my former life imploded back in the city.my phone, which I'd left charging in the room, had been mercifully quiet all morning. The beauty of being in the middle of nowhere was that whatever fresh hell Brooke and her circus were creating, it couldn't reach me until I was ready to deal with it. I was sipping coffee and watching eagles circle over the lake when I finally decided to check my messages around noon. Holy shit. Apparently, while I was enjoying my peaceful mountain retreat, absolute chaos had erupted back at Lakeside Manor. Despite my canceling everything 3 days ago, despite the venue confirming the cancellation, despite multiple people being informed that there was no wedding happening, somehow 30 people had still shown up in full wedding attire expecting to see me pledge my eternal love to a woman who was probably hungover at her ex-boyfriend's apartment. The messages from Jordan painted a picture so absurd it could have been a Saturday Night Live sketch. Brooke and Helen had apparently told select family members that the wedding was just postponed, not canceled, and that everything would work itself out by Saturday. They'd convinced Brooke's grandmother, her aunts and uncles, a handful of cousins, and even some of her college friends to show up anyway because Marcus would come to his senses. But here's where it got really good. Lakeside Manor, being a popular venue, had booked another event in our place, a corporate retreat for some tech companies celebrating their quarterly achievements. So when Brooke's relatives showed up expecting to find a wedding ceremony, they instead walked into a room full of software engineers wearing matching polo shirts and discussing customer acquisition metrics. Dude, Jordan had texted, you should see the photos Rachel's getting from her friend who works at the venue. Brooke's grandmother showed up in a floor-length purple dress and a fascinator, demanding to know where the bridal party was. Meanwhile, there's a guy in khakis giving a PowerPoint presentation about user engagement in the background. It's surreal. The venue staff, God bless them, had tried to explain that there was no wedding scheduled, but Helen had apparently gone full Karen mode, demanding to speak with managers and threatening to sue everyone in sight. Security had to be called when she tried to force her way into the conference room where the tech bros were trying to enjoy their team-building exercises. But the absolute crown jewel of this disaster was what happened when Derek's father, Robert Morrison, showed up. Apparently, Derek had been telling his parents that he was getting married to Brooke, conveniently leaving out the small detail that she was supposed to be marrying someone else first. Robert had driven 4 hours from Milwaukee, wearing his best suit and carrying a wedding gift, expecting to watch his son finally settle down with a nice girl. Instead, he walked into a clusterfuck of confused wedding guests, corporate retreat attendees, and venue staff trying to manage the chaos. When he asked where Derek was, someone helpfully informed him that Derek was probably at home with his fiancée, who had just canceled her wedding to another man 3 days ago. According to the reports I was getting, Robert had stood there for a full minute processing this information before asking to speak with Helen Patterson. The conversation that followed was apparently loud enough to be heard over the corporate team's trust fall exercises. Your daughter was supposed to marry someone else today? Robert had asked, his voice carrying across the entire venue. It's complicated, Helen had replied, probably realizing that her carefully constructed narrative was about to collapse. And my son was involved with her while she was engaged to this other man. Derek and Brooke have a special connection. My son helped break up an engagement? Robert's voice was getting louder. My son, who I raised to be a decent human being, was sleeping with another man's fiancée? That's when Helen made her fatal mistake. Your son has cancer. Brooke was just being supportive during his medical crisis. The silence that followed was apparently so complete that even the tech bros stopped their presentation to see what was happening. Robert stood there, staring at Helen, before pulling out his phone and calling Derek right there in front of everyone. Derek, he said, loud enough for half the venue to hear. I'm standing in a place where you're supposed to be getting married today, except there's no wedding because the bride was apparently already engaged to someone else. And this woman is telling me you have cancer. So I have one question for you. What the fuck is going on? The phone conversation lasted about 30 seconds before Robert hung up and turned back to Helen and the assembled crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "my son does not have cancer. He has never had cancer. He's been lying to manipulate this woman and destroy her relationship with her fiancé. And as of right now, he's no longer my son." Then he walked out, leaving his wedding gift on the reception table and Helen standing there with her mouth open like a fish out of water. The police were called for the second time in 3 days, and the whole group was finally escorted off the property. But the damage was done. Brooke's family had witnessed the complete exposure of Derek's lies, Helen's manipulation tactics, and the utter insanity of their entire plan. The best part, according to Jordan's updates, was that Brooke's sister Diana had been recording the whole thing on her phone. By the time I was reading these messages, clips of Robert disowning Derek and Helen's shocked reaction were already circulating on social media. Diana had even sent a message to Jordan. "Please tell Marcus I'm sorry for my family's insanity. This is completely unhinged, and I'm done with all of them. Also, can you send me his address? I want to return the wedding gift I bought. He deserves better than this circus." As I sat there reading about the spectacular finale to what should have been my wedding day, I felt something I didn't expect: gratitude. Not just relief, not just vindication, but genuine gratitude that Brooke had sent me that text on Wednesday. Because if she hadn't, I would have married into this family of manipulative, delusional people and probably spent years trying to figure out why I was so miserable. Instead, I was sitting on a mountain, breathing clean air, and watching my former problems destroy themselves without any help from me. It was the best wedding day I never had. 6 months later, I was sitting in my new apartment, a beautiful corner unit in Lincoln Park that I could actually afford now that I wasn't splitting everything with someone who considered a $300 throw pillow a necessity, scrolling through my phone and marveling at how completely my life had transformed. The autumn sunlight was streaming through windows that were actually clean because I'd learned to take care of my own space, and my coffee tasted better than it ever had when I was sharing a kitchen with someone who criticized my brewing technique daily. The aftermath of what I'd started calling the Great Wedding Disaster of 2025 had been almost poetic in its justice. Brooke and Derek were still together, if you could call what they had together. Last I'd heard through the Chicago Gossip Network, they were living in Derek's basement studio apartment because Brooke had been evicted from our old place after missing 3 months of rent. Apparently, when you spend all your time having dramatic meltdowns on social media instead of going to work, employers tend to notice. Their relationship, from what I could gather through mutual acquaintances who couldn't resist sharing updates, was exactly as toxic and miserable as you'd expect. Brooke had discovered that Derek, without the thrill of sneaking around and lying to other people, was just an unemployed man-child who played video games all day and couldn't hold down a job because he kept getting fired for personality conflicts with his supervisors. Derek, meanwhile, had learned that Brooke, without the ego boost of having multiple men competing for her attention, was just a high-maintenance drama queen who expected him to fund her lifestyle while she found herself. The best part was that Brooke kept posting these obviously fake happy couple photos on Instagram, trying to convince the world that they were living some great love story. But anyone with functioning eyes could see that Derek looked miserable in every single picture, and Brooke's captions were getting increasingly desperate. "Living my best life with my soulmate," she'd write, while Derek looked like he was being held hostage in the background of their selfies. Helen and Roger's divorce had been finalized 2 months ago, and from what I'd heard, it had been spectacular. Roger had apparently kept detailed records of Helen's spending habits and her involvement in encouraging Brooke's affair, which hadn't played well in court. Helen was now living in a 1-bedroom apartment and working at a department store cosmetics counter, a far cry from her country club queen lifestyle. Roger, meanwhile, had moved to Florida, bought a boat, and according to his Facebook posts, was living his best life fishing and playing golf without anyone telling him he was doing it wrong. The Morrison family drama had been equally satisfying to watch from a distance. Derek's father, Robert, had followed through on his threat to disown his son, cutting off all financial support and removing Derek from his will. Derek's mother had sided with Robert after learning the full extent of Derek's lies and manipulation. Last I'd heard, Derek had tried reaching out to them around Christmas, but they'd refused to even take his calls. But honestly, the most satisfying part of this whole experience wasn't watching my former problems self-destruct. It was discovering what my life looked like when I wasn't constantly managing someone else's emotional chaos. For the first time in years, I could make plans without having to check with someone who might suddenly decide she had feelings about whatever I wanted to do. I could have friends over without worrying about whether they'd meet Brooke's social standards. I could eat cereal for dinner if I wanted to, or spend an entire Saturday reading without someone complaining that I was being antisocial. My work life had improved dramatically too. Without the constant stress of relationship drama, I'd been able to focus on my projects and had gotten promoted to senior account manager just last month. My boss had actually commented on how much more creative and confident I'd become, which was hilarious because all I'd done was remove one extremely negative person from my daily routine. The climbing group I joined had become a regular part of my week, and through them I'd met Elise Chun, a software engineer who worked for one of those companies that makes apps people actually use instead of corporate nonsense. When I told her the story of my canceled wedding, she'd laughed so hard she'd almost fallen off the climbing wall. "Wait," she'd said. "She actually thought you'd be okay with her sleeping with her ex-boyfriend before your wedding? And then she was surprised when you canceled everything. She called me mature and secure for agreeing to it," I'd explained. "That's not mature, that's being a doormat. There's a huge difference." What I loved about Elise was that she was exactly the opposite of everything that had been wrong with my relationship with Brooke. She was direct instead of manipulative, honest instead of dramatic, and she actually seemed to enjoy my company instead of treating me like an accessory to her lifestyle. When she said she wanted to do something, she meant it. When she was upset about something, she told me what was wrong instead of making me guess. It was like discovering that relationships didn't have to be psychological warfare disguised as romance. We'd been dating for 3 months now, and not once had she mentioned needing closure with any ex-boyfriends. Crazy concept, I know. The few mutual friends I still had from my Brooke days would occasionally update me on the ongoing drama. Apparently, Brooke and Derek had broken up and gotten back together 4 times since my wedding disaster, each time with increasingly public social media announcements about their unbreakable bond and meant-to-be connection. The last breakup had involved Brooke throwing Derek's PlayStation out of their second-story window, which had been captured on someone's Ring camera and shared widely among people who knew them. Gretchen, Derek's sister who had been Brooke's maid of honor, had actually reached out to me a few months ago to apologize for her family's role in the whole mess. She'd been mortified when she learned about Derek's cancer lies and had apparently spent weeks texting Brooke trying to talk sense into her before finally giving up and cutting contact with both of them. "I should have seen what was happening," she'd said. "Derek always was a manipulative little shit, but I thought he'd grown out of it. And Brooke, I don't know what happened to her. She used to be fun and normal, but somewhere along the way she turned into this person who thinks the world owes her something." Looking back now, I could see all the red flags I'd ignored during my relationship with Brooke. The way she'd talk about her exes like they were all crazy or couldn't handle her. The way she'd create drama with waitstaff and retail workers for no reason. The way she'd test my boundaries constantly, seeing how much she could get away with. The way she'd always have some crisis that required immediate attention and emotional support, but somehow never had time to provide the same support when I needed it. But the biggest red flag had been how exhausted I felt all the time when I was with her. I thought it was just the stress of wedding planning or work pressure, but now I realized it was the constant effort of trying to manage someone who was fundamentally unmanageable. These days, I woke up looking forward to my day instead of wondering what crisis would need my attention. I made plans with friends without having to negotiate or justify my choices. I pursued hobbies that made me happy instead of activities that would impress other people. And when people asked me about the wedding that never happened, I told them the truth. It was the best thing that never happened to me, because Brooke's text message hadn't ended everything. It had set me free.